Hey, welcome back to Utah Stories. So we are talking with Kseniya
Kseniya
from the Nomad Alliance, and we're going to be discussing in just a minute this sexy nomad. This has gotten incredible press all over the world, from the Boston Globe to the Daily Mail. It's just a sexy homeless calendar that they're using to raise funds. But before we get to that, I want to ask one more question. One of the biggest challenges facing a sanctioned campground or any campground that the homeless inhabit is drug use.
Yeah.
When you have an open air drug scene and people are using drugs, how do you stop that from happening when a lot of these shelter resistant people are drug users? They're addicts who really do just want to sit in the park and be able to be left alone to use drugs. How do you prevent that from happening in a sanctioned camp?
Several things. So one, drug use does go up when someone is homeless and is in a state of fight or flight all the time. And with these incessant abatements, we are finding that people are using much, much more because they have to stay awake to keep moving. Javi, who was in our first calendar, he said, if I get my heroin fix, all my basic needs are met. I'm not cold, so I don't need to find shelter or a blanket. I'm not hungry, so I don't need to find a meal. I'm not as thirsty, so I don't need to find water. I can stay awake and protect myself. I can walk all night through a snowstorm. I can, stay alive. We've housed people in microhome communities on several properties back in 2021 and early 22, and we found that every single one of the people we housed, and we housed 25 people from one night to a whole year, that they all reported that their drug use went down exponentially by 85% or more. And that comes from safety, and that comes from a good night's sleep. That comes from knowing that your things are safe and, being able to get a job and having something to look forward to as you wake up every day. So that I know. And in Community First, Alan also mentioned the same thing, that they all self-report that 65% reduction in alcohol use, 85% reduction of hard drug use once they move into their tiny home community. And two, we toured the Nomad.
Can't you eliminate it? Can't you tell them you can be here, you can be safe, all your belongings kept safe, but you gotta leave the drugs out? Can't you just say that?
We did that at our camps. We said, one rule is please don't use on the property. Ostensibly, I know that they must have.
Do you kick them out though if they do?
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
We take a restorative justice approach where we understand that people who are hurting reach for things that make themselves feel better. All of us do.
But couldn't we just switch to like a can of beer or I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
medical cannabis goes a long way. And a lot of people in the streets say that if they had access to medical cannabis, they wouldn't use the hard drugs. Mm-hmm. So, there are solutions that abound. I don't know if Utah's there yet. I know that in touring Colorado, and our board went and toured what is considered best practices site for a sanctioned campground, and one of the first, Colorado Village Collaborative. They, in their governing docs, it is a sober space. But in their operations, they operate with a see, feel, hear kind of methodology, where if I don't see it, if I don't feel any sort of negative impacts from you using, if I don't smell it, if I don't hear it, then we can continue to coexist. They have harm reduction there. They have detox available. They have all these things.
Does that work though?
It does.
Because Dave DeRocher, who was on the program a couple weeks ago, he said the only thing that saved his life from being a drug addict and a criminal was prison.
Yeah.
And he stopped using and got clean because of prison. And he didn't want to go to prison for 25 years, and that's what got him on the path of, being in a work program, Delancey Street, which turned into the Other Side Academy. Yeah. What about tough love? Like one question we're going to ask to the panel tomorrow is, how do you draw the line between compassion and safety, but tough love? If you want to be on the right path, you got to be clean. How do you draw that line?
Well, look at the reality. That's all I want to say is that there's expectations and then there's the reality. And there's a lot of nuance in the situation. We already operate in a tough love situation. We already have the Other Side Academy that will take people that are willing to be completely sober when they have no other option, jail or that. We already have the tiny home village that will be, completely sober space, no drugs, no alcohol of any kind. The shelters operate with complete sobriety, although they understand that that doesn't work. Even at movie night, we had people, smoking meth in the bathroom on occasion. It just happens. And so what the problem is we don't have any low barrier space for the people, which is why our streets become that. And you can't just say, well, you shouldn't do this and you need to be sober and you need to get clean, because the reality is,
and I think everybody needs a place to go.
Yeah.
But again, tomorrow night we've been preparing a clip where a homeless couple I interviewed in Sugar House.
Yeah.
They'd been living on the streets. The guy there, Dennis, his recommendation is, if you want to use drugs and you can't pass a UA test, then you should be segregated away from the people who are in recovery. You can't have the people in recovery right next to the people who are strung out every day, because obviously it's a lot harder to recover if you're around it. And he said you should be in something like a ghetto. If you just can't stop and you want to use all day every day, you need to be in a ghetto away from everybody else. I know that sounds harsh, but and then once you're on the road to recovery, then maybe a little bit nicer place, and then if you're got a job, then maybe an apartment. We do it completely backwards. You get you're a complete strung out drug addict. We'll put you up in the Magnolia apartments because you get enough points to say you're super high risk or you're disabled. Do you think that Dennis has it right that we should just be allowing people who can't get on recovery to be in a very poor but place to be?
I don't know about that. I know that in Scandinavia, I can't remember if it was Norway or Sweden, they have an island for the heroin users that's connected by a bridge, and the state provides, checks all the heroin to make sure it's very clean, that it, that people, it's not laced with fentanyl, and that's the only place where you can legally use heroin is this one island off the coast. And there's people that, will go there, use for a weekend and then leave. But there's people that live there, but they live long, healthy lives because they're not overdosing. The heroin's clean. There's food there. There's work opportunities, and they're able to lead highly functional lives, but on this island. So
maybe Stansbury Island.
I really don't know the answer to this. What I know is this is an impossible problem that really nobody's hard. Been able to solve. We just got
some more comments.
Good.
Can you read them into the microphone, MJ? Is that possible? Or is it? If not, I'll just repeat them.
It says, in sanctioned campgrounds, are those actually safer than how people are now? Talking about crime against each other if all are within one area.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And seeing the Colorado Village
Sorry, I don't think people hear the question.
No, sorry, go ahead.
The question was, in sanctioned campgrounds, are they safer than people are now? Is there data to show that a sanctioned camp keeps the people there safe? What's the name of the person who asked the question? Casey Bug.
Well, Quika of the Colorado Village Collaborative told us that crime is reduced in every neighborhood they've moved into. And I think that's very telling. And in touring their campground, there were no loiterers out front. There were no tent cities. It was very quiet. Like, we passed by it. We didn't even know there was a sanctioned camp right there, and it's all fenced off and it's covered. But what we do know is the data shows that whenever there is scarcity, when unemployment goes up, crime goes up. And so people, the Jean Valjean thing, they will steal a loaf of bread to feed their children, metaphorically. So when you provide for a space with abundance, where you don't have to steal a tent, where you don't have to steal a sleeping bag, where you don't have to steal to get a meal, then yes, of course, it's safer. Plus, we've got hygiene. We've got bathrooms.
Can you pull that up, MJ? Colorado Village Collaborative?
Collaborative, yeah.
Collaborative.
And we did do a video. I sent you guys a video of our little tour that shows, everything from how clean it is from the outside to the inside to everything.
Yeah, let's play that. So this is your tour of the Colorado Village Collaborative.
Yeah.
How they're doing it there. Yeah. So can you see on the screen? Can you tell our viewers what we're looking at?
Yeah, so this is outside of probably their 8th site, and because they've had to move initially every 6 months and then
Fears the
every year.
unknown, fears
Now
change.
this site
We
is
bring
for
all of
2
that.
years, but they have three sites in total, and then 2 tiny home communities as well. What I think is really is staggering is seeing how clean all the spaces are, and how clean the street is outside of it, how few people there are actually, loitering and living outside. There's no tents. And what's especially important that I want to stress is every best practice, every successful sanctioned campsite has been a grassroots development. The ones that have failed have been top-down, state-run. There are tiny home communities in Oregon and in Washington that are sitting mostly empty because they are run by the state and by people that don't understand this population. QICA, or the Colorado Village Collaborative, 75% of the people that run and manage the camp are people with lived experience. Everyone that you see on the screen speaking talks about how important that is, that the people that manage the camp have also lived that life.
And even if you look at the homeless resource centers, what are the ones that are failing and what are the ones that are succeeding? The ones that succeed use the manpower and the labor from the people who've received the recovery to work in the operations. So if you look at the in-between, Jillian Olmstead is going to be there tomorrow, and they use all the people who've recovered out of their programs as staff, and they take ownership in the facility. They love the facility. They love the tenants who come in. And the same goes for Other Side Academy. The same goes for Switchpoint. They utilize the human capital that they're building and creating in the program to operate the facilities. If you look at the operations of the road home, why are those such a disaster? I mean,
and extremely high turnover, very low pay, really unrealistic case management loads.
They can't find case managers. The peer-to-peer system obviously is the model that works.
It is the model, exactly.
Why aren't they following that? Why don't they?
And the
do
RFP required every single employee of the sanctioned camp to run a background check. And our power is also very much like the Colorado Village Collaborative. We engage the people that we help and get into housing as our outreach team, as people that come and help their own community, like Brandy, who we recently housed with a baby. She's the first to show up, the last to leave. She's there every time. She comes out and does outreach, and she knows the population, which means that they trust us more because to be honest, the state and a lot of other institutions have squandered that trust. And so that really is a best practice from all over the country. And yet the state will require, these background checks that will prohibit the vast majority of the people that we would like to hire in the sanctioned camp from being employed. And, Caballo, who's in our calendar, he said, Nomad Alliance saved us, and Nomad Alliance understands us. They are us, and that's why they need to run the sanctioned campground, because not only will they, treat us with respect and dignity, but they will also employ us. And we all want to work, but we want to work in a thing that lights our soul on fire.
Yeah, and so it seems to me that the state is going to do their own version of a sanctioned space. But it seems that everything unsanctioned is where the homeless people actually want to go.
Movie night
was completely unsanctioned. Fort Pioneer, if you look at the history, that was actually a really clean, safe,
Camp
according to
Last
everybody.
Hope.
Camp Last Hope.
Yeah.
Those were all unsanctioned.
So
is that the way it's going to be? The unsanctioned versus the sanctioned, and everybody's going to use the
our
unsanctioned?
illegal microhome communities. I mean, the cops were never called. I went and did outtake interviews with the neighbors. They said that they never felt unsafe. Crime didn't increase. They didn't have any robberies. And they'd welcome them back.
Yeah, and I point out the obvious.
Yeah.
The guy running the state homeless Office of Homeless Coordination is one of the biggest politician developers in the state of Utah. The obvious conflict of interest is he wants to dip his hand in the honey jar and be able to pick the winners and losers of who gets these affordable housing development projects. Why else would a big giant developer be running the homeless industrial complex in Utah? That industrial complex ensures people who get giant salaries to solve homelessness continue to get those salaries because they're not actually solving the problem.
Exactly. And then the people at the bottom doing the actual work get nothing.
Pittance,
Get pittance, you know, $16 an hour. They're most of the people that are actually working case management, working, you know, the front staff is basically homeless. I live in a motorhome, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
You and everybody else who's actually keeping people warm and alive.
Yeah.
You're just not getting that funding from the government.
Yeah, we're not. And you know, and part of the problem is we've kind of in pushing our state to be better and these institutions to be better and doing, you know, advocating for Code Blue and the sanction camp and calling a spade when, you know, the government is failing. We've basically prohibited any sort of, you know, big RFP or contract from being gifted to us in the first place because we are outsiders and we are pushing.
Exactly what the boat I'm in.
Yeah.
They will not come on this program.
Yeah.
They will not answer our questions. They refuse to. And I think the situation we're in, and I brought it up in the intro to the program, is that we are running into a situation where the media they do answer to will not ask the tough questions.
Yeah.
They will not point them out on their deficiencies and their failures. Yeah. And they only want to work with the softball media questions, and that's just not us. Yeah. And where does democracy flourish? When you're able to shed light and point a light at where the failures are and talk about those things and discuss them. Yeah. And that's really all we're trying to do.
All we want to do is just for all of the institutions to be better and to house more people. We just want to save lives. You know?
Let's quickly talk about the calendar while we have 5 minutes. So this calendar has received a huge amount of media attention. I couldn't believe when it popped up on the Daily Mail, and there's a picture of you. So in the UK, they're reading all about you and your nonprofit because you created this calendar. So why has this story gone viral?
Well, we were working with a reporter of the Washington Post, and the story came out, and there's, it's controversial, and we knew it would be controversial, but we believe that if you're talking about the homeless epidemic, that's always good. If you're concerned that a nomad is being exploited, at least you're concerned for the welfare of an unsheltered individual.
I'm going to flip through this calendar if you can get it, MJ. I want to show you how scandalous this is. There's a guy with his shirt off he's holding a chain. What does that imply?
He's actually, and we take the pictures right where the people have stayed. Like this is now owned by, Big Deconstruction, that lot.
There's a bike mechanic.
That's Greyhound. That's the site of the sanctioned campground.
Yeah, you're essentially humanizing these people, showing that they have skills, they have ability. They're not different than any other people who really have jobs. And the thing I related to is like the firefighters will do something like this. The guys have their shirts off to raise funding. I think it's a cool idea.
Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah,
that's what I don't understand is why do we infantilize this population and take their agency and their consent from them? Why can firefighters pose in something like this, but the unsheltered can't, and they're being exploited? And yet, if you see their faces when they're asked to pose in this, you would just cry because, the problem is this population is the invisibles. They are our untouchables. We are in a caste system, even though we don't talk about it. And so people pass them and they don't look them in the eye and they ignore them. So
and they really are disenfranchised. If your voice no longer matters, so something we did that was really controversial is I just kept talking to homeless people. And I'd say 1 out of every 3 camps said there's this homeless serial killer on the loose.
Yes.
And they kept saying it. They kept saying it. And so I didn't know. And I tried to do a grandma request. Are there bodies? Whatever. I couldn't get clear answers. So I just said to the police, I said, if you're not going to fulfill my grandma request and answer my questions, we're going to go ahead and break a story that all the homeless people, a lot of them we've talked to say there's a homeless serial killer.
I've heard it for years.
Yeah, so there's that rumor spinning. Was it true? I think the truth is a few people are getting murdered Is it one person? No. But is there a larger, big drug epidemic that's causing a lot of death? Absolutely. The serial killer mostly is drugs, because these people are allowed to just stay out and shoot up all day long until people start dying. And then, bodies disappear.
Yeah.
They go to the morgue. They're not talked about. They're not reported on. Yeah. And for all people know, it's a serial killer. I don't believe there's one person serial killer out there murdering people, but it's just there's so much homeless death, and that is being absolutely covered up.
And
the police won't.
The medical examiner hadn't been tracking homeless deaths, and now we're finally going to get some data in 2024, maybe.
But we were basically smeared for reporting on that.
Yeah.
But because we were representing their voice, this is what they are saying.
But I've heard it over and over again, and honestly, Richard, I think there are people out there that are preying on the homeless because this is the most vulnerable population. This is a population that will never call the cops, and if they do call the cops, they won't be believed. And so and I've heard of, rapists out there targeting women with masks. Like, I know what they drive. I know, people that have had friends that have died, and they're working girls. And we don't, if we don't care about the working girls.
We just kind of ignore the underclass and what's happening with them. We don't investigate their murders like we would a housed person. Why is there that differential?
Exactly.
And it's like, I think you got.
And why can't beautiful men pose in a calendar? And let me just and I do want to say that they do get paid. Half of the profits from the sale or from the donations towards the calendar get put in a pot that funds our work, and then half it gets put in a pot to be split among the men, and we give them little cash stipends all year long. So when I see them, I'm like, hey, here's 20 or here's 30, and you should see their faces light up. And then they get to say they're paid models. They also get a little bit of notoriety on the streets.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
And I give this to every politician with whom I meet, every police officer at an abatement. A funny story recently, there was some police officers at an abatement. I went up and gave them a calendar, and one of the officers was like, oh, this is the calendar. I've been wanting one of these. And they looked through it, they laughed. And then Benny, Mr. February, comes up to us, and I'm giving out some food and doing some outreach. And he's like, you'll never believe it. And I'm like, you'll never believe what happened. I gave your calendar to the police. And Benny's like, oh my God, they just stopped me. And I swore I was going to jail. I'm like, wasn't even doing anything. And they just stopped him to chide him and call him Mr. February.
The police did?
Yeah. But what's
That's
amazing,
cool.
too, is then they get to know that, look, Benny is from the foster care system. This is the kind of abuse that Benny's experienced, and these are his hurdles from getting off the street.
Wow.
And so it humanizes a population that are, these are repeat offenders. Kenny, for instance, he said, it reminded me that I had a name. And Caballo, and this is, apologize if I get a little emotional, Caballo, he has terminal cancer. And, he says, it's a crowning achievement to my life to be 65 years old and still be attracted enough to be chosen for a calendar. And through all the hurdles of his life, from, mental health issues and homelessness and his physical ailments, I still had something big happen before it's all over. And Nomad made that possible for me.
Wow, that's cool.
And they're not going to break me. And Nomad has made this possible. Yeah.
Wow, he's on the streets with
he's
terminal
on the streets.
cancer.
A lot of them actually
He had
do.
to talk to the in-between.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they focus on.
They do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Kseniya, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Richard. It's an honor.
Yeah, good luck to you this winter
you.
and doing the great work you do and keeping people alive and finding them shelter and warmth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if anybody wants to support our work, go to nomadalliance.org. We always, need blankets and clothing and coats and gloves. We're doing a big push for the winter, especially tents and tarps are needed at this time. There's drop locations on our website. And more than anything, we need money. It takes a lot of money to run a nonprofit. And also purchase our calendar. You can do that online. Thank you.
Cool. Great. And that's just nomadalliance.org. All right.
Yeah.
And we still have a few tickets left for our documentary film and panel discussion tomorrow night at Broovies. Consider if we sell out this first screening, there's a very good chance we will have a second screening But we need to sell this one out first. We're really close to getting there. And then we will partner with likely the Salt Lake Film Society and have another screening at the Broadway Theater. And our goal is just to help solve the homeless problem with those who are a part of the solution, so that the people who are a part of the problem actually listen.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching. We'll see you next
Thank
time.
you.